Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Ramzy Baroud. I was born and raised in a Gaza refugee camp called Nusayr. The genocide in Gaza is not the start of history. The genocide in Gaza is one of the most horrific, if not single handedly, the most horrific event of violence carried out by settler colonial apartheid Israel against the Palestinian people. But all of this did not happen in a vacuum either. The Palestinian people have been experiencing uh, uh, Israeli violence uh, at various stages of their history. They are a nation that has been colonized since 1947-48, and they are being collectively punished for resisting that colonialism. Israel is a settler colonial society. This is why Gaza is ours forever conference. And that's why the article in the Jerusalem Post arguing that uh, South Lebanon is not the south of Lebanon, but rather the north of Israel. This is kind of mainstream thinking in Israel. This whole idea of Greater Israel as promoted by Bezalel Smotrich, but also being there and many others, including Netanyahu himself. They don't truly believe that the borders of the state of Israel are viable and defensible in their current form. Therefore, they need to create this constant urge or need to create buffer zones. And the buffer zones become occupied territories, and the occupied territories become annexed territories, and the annexed territories become part of this greater Israel. It's the Israeli settler colonial game that they have been playing for such a long, long time. Just look at the West Bank and you will understand why this is the case. If you look at the roots of how Israeli settlements become settlements, it starts with a small caravan, a mobile home or two, a water generator, electric generator. A single family moves in. Uh, a whole unit of the Israeli army comes to protect it, and the family becomes two, 10, 100, and then the settlement becomes a city, and the city becomes recognized by the government as if legal, and they become, the illegal becomes legal, and so forth and so on. And now they are saying, well, let's annex the entirety of the West Bank. But you see, the whole thing starts with a caravan, it ends with annexing the entirety of the West Bank. That's settler colonialism. Palestinians, of course, have recognized that from the very, very beginning, and they have fought against it. They have mobilized against it. They have resisted it in every possible form using armed resistance or popular mobilization. A very quick distinction here. Let me just check the time to see if I exceeded. And I might have exceeded it. So I'm going to try to make it a bit short. For Palestinians, the idea of resistance is not an academic theory. It's not something that is conjured up within the convenience that is available to us activists and scholars and writers and journalists and analysts and all of that in various parts of the world. What is the most moral and ethical form of resistance, and so forth and so on. It doesn't exist in Palestine itself, at least not in the refugee camp where I was born and raised. Nobody talks about it. Maybe you'll find some university somewhere in the West Bank where some Western educated intellectuals kind of talk about these issues, but they don't really matter a great deal to ordinary people, because in Palestine, the term we use for resistance is muqawama. And when we talk about muqawama, we immediately assume that is an all encompassing concept that includes everything. An old woman can practice muqawama by insisting on setting vegetable stands in a market where the Israeli army told her that she couldn't do so. Or a teacher insists on muqawama by teaching Palestinian history to children, even though it is not allowed by the Israeli military administration. A man can practice muqawam by wearing a kufiya, even though he could pay a heavy price for wearing that Palestinian national symbol. But it's the same mode of thinking that makes them see that muqawama as someone carrying a gun and resisting the Israeli army invading a refugee camp, as we see in Jabalia and Beit Lahia and Khan Yunis, Deir al-Balah, Nusayrat, and all these other places right now. They don't see it as two, like, kind of two separate entities of thinking. Just it's essentially the same idea. So I think it's really important that we clarify this. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons behind Israel's utter madness and frustration is that the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, have never ceased resisting or using various methods of muqawama since the beginning of the Israeli colonialism of Palestine, even before the establishment of Israel on the ruins of Palestinian homes in 1947-48. So we are here looking at two different elements here. A colonial state that keeps expanding at the expense of the native population, and a native population that is fighting back in all of its power, by all of its means, even at the expense of their very extermination. I think it's, anyone who has, I don't want to, kind of use emotional language, but anyone with a conscience, with a heart, any human being, any feeling human being cannot possibly look at what's happening in Gaza and see children being massacred in large numbers and find any kind of excuse or justification or context that would explain why the Israelis are doing this to the Palestinians. I think uh, it's obvious that we are at a historical juncture. And I think those who have turned their backs and turned their conscience and their eyes and gaze somewhere else while Palestinians are being killed in such large numbers, I think they will have to answer to themselves and their children in the future to why they have done nothing while Palestinians were being massacred. My promise to you, in fact, my pledge to you, is that the Palestinian people will never cease resisting. And it's not because I am offering any sort of prophecy here, but as a people's historian who wrote many books on people's history of Palestine, I tell you that resistance or muqawama in Palestine is a concept that comes from the collective heart and collective conscience of the Palestinian people. And that's why they resist. There's a culture of resistance that is much deeper than any intellectual or academic argument. And they use it, they utilize it to its fullest. Uh, Israel knows that, and they know that well, and this is why they are very disturbed. In fact, they are very disturbed by the latest numbers that within this year of genocide in 2024, 64,000 Palestinian babies were born, and they find that extremely frustrating because we've killed a very large number of them, and 64,000 of them were born. Many of them were born uh, um, without dads, and many of them actually they had their moms either died during birth or died afterwards. But for us Palestinians, this is how we resist. Our survival, our continuity, our persistence is a form of resistance as well. One last thing I'd like to add, and I apologize for exceeding my time, is that I feel like the conversation like this one is quite important because it pushes us forward from that of trying to find excuses or justification or even apologizing for why Palestinians do this and do that into the more urgent and critical conversations of thinking beyond the genocide. How do we hold Israel accountable when the war is over? How do we ensure that there can never be any rethinking of what Israel has done or any attempt at creating a moral equivalence between what the Israeli government and military is doing and what the Palestinian people are going through? I very much appreciate this particular teach-in, and thank you for including me. And I encourage you to do more and more of this again, because we really do need to elevate the conversation from the defensiveness that you kind of see in mainstream media into these kind of critical thinking about Palestine post this genocide, about how do we rebuild Gaza, and I mean rebuild Gaza in terms of discourse, in terms of language, in terms of how we situate our understanding of Gaza within the larger history of the Palestinian struggle against Israeli settler colonialism. Thank you very much and hope to join you again in a future teaching.